Hello everyone, welcome to Sir Psych, and today is Valentine's Day, so I thought it might be interesting to talk about MBTI types, personality in general, and compatibility, how likely certain types are to get along with other types, these sorts of things. Let's get into it. So how does personality type and compatibility work in the MBTI system? Well, some people might tell you that certain types are very likely to get along naturally, or they're going to have a much easier time getting into a relationship with each other. And to some degree, this is true. But I think that there is a distinct difference between recognizing that certain types might have an easier time getting along with one another and then moving it to this kind of extreme of types are meant for other types. And I think that that's the kind of mindset you want to avoid when you're getting into looking at personality type and compatibility. So the way that I look at it is that there are correlations in what types you're likely to see with other types in terms of relationships. But that isn't going to mean that every person who is an INTJ, for example, is going to want to be with an ENFP, for example. That might be like the stereotype relationship that you see with INTJs, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be the most fulfilling. But on the opposite end of that spectrum, I think people are quick to disregard personality types that might not naturally mesh with them at first because, they think that that type just isn't going to work with them. And I think that that throws a lot of potential, friendships and relationships out the window. I would say it's not dangerous, but it's not something I think you should do. I think it's okay to recognize what you want in a partner, but disregarding someone just because of their type alone might not be the best thing for you to do. Now, the reason that the Briggs duo actually created MBTI is that they wanted people to be able to communicate better, and one of the kind of like core foundations and one of the core uses of the MBTI system originally was for like relationship dynamics, things of this nature. But it wasn't for matching people into relationships. It was for helping people overcome communication differences that they might be experiencing because of their personality types. And I think that that's the big takeaway when it comes to personality types and compatibility is that you as an individual and your personal interests and values are going to outweigh what your personality type tells you that maybe you should be interested in. And it's okay to maybe not be interested in something that's stereotypical for your type to be interested in when it comes to a partner. Another way that you could think about it is that some people like to have a partner who is very similar in interest to them, and some people like to have partners who are very different in terms of interests and behavior, these sorts of things. Now, psychology tells us in general that we're more likely to be interested in people who are very similar to us, but I tend to find that there are people out there who like the relationship dynamics that are different in terms of personality type, even if they're similar in terms of interests. So we see the stereotype of the INTJ and the ENFP, for example, quite often in the MBTI community. And it's because these types are very different in terms of how they behave and act that we see them as kind of being this interesting pair for each other. Now, what I tend to find is that these relationships can work, but they might run into some stress in the long term. The more different people are initially, the more there's going to be initial stress that needs to be overcome for the relationship to work in the long run. Some of you may know that I've been married for a few years now, and my wife is, I believe she's an ENFJ. I'm fairly certain she's an extroverted feeling dominant type. And the first year or two of the relationship was quite difficult in terms of us missing each other's marks in terms of communication because as an INTJ, like FE is just not something that I'm ever really processing. I barely even processing FI for myself, so it's like I'm not even really considering it that too much. But at the same time, it was kind of similar for her when it comes to like my extroverted thinking, where it was like, okay, I need to get this practical outcome, or I need to make sure things are organized and resources are maintained. For her, it's like, whoa, you're putting too much on me at one time, and that is something that you're going to have to learn to overcome, but it can be overcome. You can be in a relationship with someone who doesn't have the same natural preferences as you. You just have to recognize that there's going to be crossed wires at times, and you need to learn strategies to overcome those. Now that my wife and I have been married for a few years, we never argue. I can't even think of a time in the past year or two where we've genuinely had an argument. And it's just because once you learn about personality and personality type and how another person communicates and what their needs are as a human, that's a big one. What are your needs? Then you can start to accommodate each other or at least do the bare minimum so the person doesn't feel like their needs are being ignored. That's something that I see a lot when it comes to people in their relationships is they're ignoring the base needs of their partner. One of the best conversations any person can have with another person if they're in a relationship is to simply ask the question, what makes you feel appreciated? Like if you have a partner, just literally walk up to them and say, "What makes you feel appreciated?" and genuinely listen. And if they say, I feel appreciated when X happens, and you're not doing X, don't take that as a personal, you know, assault. Don't take it as them being mad at you. Just listen and be like, okay, I understand that's what makes you feel appreciated. And then you can express in return what makes you feel appreciated. And if two people can recognize what the other person needs in terms of feeling appreciated, then you can really see relationships start to grow and flourish. And I think that that's something that's independent of personality type, but something that you need to be more aware of if you're in a relationship that is going to have struggles when it comes to the communication. Now, I have some opinions on what relationships are going to be easy and aren't going to be easy for types, and I'll go over that here in just a second. So, which types are most likely to naturally get along with each other? Are there any rules that you can follow? Well, I don't have any like hard set rules. And as I talked about earlier, I think it's better to find someone that you think is interesting and then work past any communication struggles that might be present while you're in that relationship instead of trying to find someone who's perfect right off the bat, because by doing that, you miss out on a lot of potential opportunities for relationships that you might enjoy. And you might actually find that you enjoy people who have qualities that you didn't expect. Myself, for example, I'll mention my ENFJ wife, for example. That's not a typical relationship partner for INTJs. And people will ask me, like, what's it like being in a relationship with an ENFJ? And, why do you like your ENFJ wife? Like, what are the qualities that you like about her? And for me, she supports my goals. And, like, that's the number one thing that I appreciate in a partner is someone who is willing to just be like, okay, you want to do something, let's do it. And for me, it's like, okay, I need to move across the country for my PhD. She's like, great, we're moving across the country for your PhD. And like that's the kind of support that I need in a partner, because I'm always going to be chasing my goals. Like that's my number one motivation in life, is to be moving towards some sort of goal that I have. Some sort of thing that I want for myself, some sort of desire. And to have a partner who supports that is something that I appreciate more than anything else. And sure, she may not have like the extroverted intuition conversation that's as easily found in NE high types. Like with my NTP friend, he and I can very, very easily, laugh, have a good time, talk, communicate in that sort of manner. But I don't know if that would be something that I'd want to have, that type of communication style all the time, as it might be something that would be even draining. Like I like having ENFPs as friends, for example, ENTPs as friends, but it could be hard if it would be something that would be all the time. And that's why I appreciate my ENFJ wife, because she supports me in my goals and we can talk about things that I think are interesting occasionally, but it's not going to be too chaotic and it's going to be very maintained. And I think that that's the same kind of thing that other people might find when they're looking for relationships, but it's not required. And what I mean by that is like, what you want out of a relationship isn't going to be the same as every other person of your type. If you're an INTJ, maybe you want to be in a relationship with an ENFP who's going to give you that crazy chaotic energy. Maybe you want to be in a relationship with an INTP so you can challenge yourself intellectually against their functions and, talk about things in a very hyper intellectual manner. Now, my one general rule of thumb, and thing that I think people should be aware of when they're in a relationship, when it comes to personality type, is if the person you're in a relationship shares no functions with you, say for example an INTJ and an ENTP or INTP or SFJ type, you're going to run into problems that you need to learn how to overcome. Because if you don't, then you're going to just be bashing your heads against each other all the time. And that applies for any two types that have no function shared. Because it's kind of like, it doesn't matter if you value the same things or you're interested in the same things, if you can't come to any sort of conclusion or agreement on those things. You essentially have to say, okay, what is important here and how can we make sure that our communication is going to come together and not just miss the mark on every single point. You'll find yourself arguing over very small things if you have no function similarities between you and a partner. And I see this a lot specifically with like INTJs and INTPs who haven't found the way to get over that roadblock yet. Because if I'm an INTJ and I'm going to be focusing on NITE, my personal goals and a practical way of getting about them, and I'm with an INTP and they want to stop every 5 seconds to analyze things with their TI, or they want to explore different possibilities from the one that I'm interested in with extroverted intuition, that's going to be very tiring and stressful if it's not something that is learned, that the two people learn to manage. So that's my real advice when it comes to MBTI type compatibility, is just be aware of the functions that the other person has. Be aware of your partner's needs and recognize that your type isn't going to determine who is the best fit for you. Instead, recognize what you want as an individual and how that might be able to be found in a certain personality type, and then maybe start looking for that. And sure, if you are someone and you have that desire for the type that is stereotypically the one for your personality type, that's fine. Again, if you're an INTJ and you like ENFPs, great, go for it. But that doesn't mean that that has to be the one type that you're looking for. And I don't think it's healthy for you to exclude everyone else based on those preferences. I know some of you watching this might be disappointed that I'm not just giving you like a blanket guide on what types are good with other types, but it's because I genuinely don't believe that that's how you should view relationship compatibility with personality types. I think it's much more healthy and beneficial for you to instead find someone who is interesting to you naturally and then use personality type as a tool to help you overcome any communication struggles that you might be experiencing with that person. And I think, if you use it as a tool to help you instead of as a tool to, get you into the relationship in the first place, then you might have a much better time and you might find more success and happiness in your relationships. So I do have a live stream on this topic that goes into more extensive detail, and I will link that down in the description box below. So if you want to see more about this topic, where I kind of went on, I think it was like an hour or so live stream and talked about it, you can see that in the description box below. I would like to remind everybody that I do have personality typing sessions available at my website, asurpsych.com, if you are interested in working with me to find out what your personality type is and what that means for you. This has been Asur from Asur Psych. Have a good one.